Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be looking at the Art of War's Detachment tier list, and we're going to be doing a reaction video of their selections. So I did a video of this myself a little while ago, and since playing the detachments a little bit more, my opinions have shifted slightly, not by much. I still think most of the detachments that I rated are going to be exactly where they're at, but some of them did slightly change. So I did want to just kind of go through this tier list with the Art of War guys and kind of just, talk about it a little bit. Quentin and Jack here, have a pretty good review. Their Aeldari content so far has been pretty spot on, I think, for how most of the detachments want to play. And I agree with a lot of what they said about, some of the units and things like that. Well, we'll see when they do their unit tier list how much I agree with everything, but I did find some of their selections in this particular video a little bit weird and possibly not all the way thought through. So I did want to talk to you guys about that, and I wanted to just let you guys know why I put the units or tiers, the detachments, in the tiers I did, and why maybe the Art of War guys haven't picked up on the greatness of some of our Aeldari detachments. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into it. And as they, go, just like a reaction video does, I will react to their commentary.
All right. Well, let's dive right in, shall we? With number 8.
Number 8, this is the worst detachment in the book, the Guardian Battle Host.
Decent rules.
Decent rules.
Decent rules. But it is.
So obviously, I don't think it's the worst. I think that, it's quite good. The reason why it's good, I think, though, is different than what some people might be thinking. I think it is better because of Azurman and Dire Avengers. I think when you put Azurman and Dire Avengers and you factor that into the detachment, it becomes a lot better. So it's not all about Guardians. You're going to have, a couple units of Storm Guardians, maybe one unit of Defenders, but then you're going to be, having the typical Eldar stuff that you always do. And you're going to be backed up by, some support weapons and Warwalkers and stuff like that. But Azurman is going to be in there, and Azurman just makes everything better. But I do agree that it is probably on the lower tier of the detachments.
Only for Guardians, and Guardians suck. You could staple rules onto them, but they do suck.
So, Guardians don't suck. They just suck at being the backbone of your army.
And so I would argue, of course, that they don't suck at all. They're a support unit, and they always have been. And they were never meant to be the backbone of your army, right? They're a support choice. They're not meant to be the core of your list.
Like 1 or 2 squads of Storm Guardians. I think that's like a great splash.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I don't think you need more than that.
No, I don't think you need more than that. Guardians don't do much anything. They have 2 fusion guns. So
you also get 2 flamers.
Do you also, or is it instead?
No, it's also. You get 4, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's neat.
They're fine.
What does it do?
So Storm Guardians are actually really good because they're only 100 points. You get 4 special weapons in the unit, which is more special weapons than any other infantry unit in the entire game, pretty much. And you get 2 power swords to boot, and a 5+ invul save for the whole unit. So it's actually a really powerful, hard-hitting unit for the cost.
Storm Guardians?
Yeah, no, the Guardian Battle Host.
It gives them +1 to hit.
Is the best gun that they can take indirect?
Yes.
Yes. So it hits on 4s no matter what.
No. Okay, so you're missing the point, Jack. Okay, so you take
my bad.
10 Guardian Defenders, and then you take Eldrad, 4 Warlocks, 1 Warlock, and a D-Cannon. They all join, and you get 1 super unit. Super unit.
It's quite a super unit, let me tell you. It is actually very good. It's very good.
And then it gets +1 to hit, +1 to wound, real wounds, +1 AP, ignores cover.
Okay.
This combo is getting close to 1,000 points in 4 CP. But it does.
No, it's not 1,000 points. It's about 500 points. But, it is a very strong unit.
Does kill upwards of 5 Space Marines every turn.
Every single time. You won't even miss, bro. Yeah, so that's pretty dumb.
I mean, like, okay, like the rules in here objectively are good. They just go on bad data sheets.
Yeah, it's a problem that a lot of armies have, where a lot of armies have good rules, but not the units to back them up. Things like, I mean, even the Grotmus detachment for Votan has that problem, right? It has okay rules, but it only goes on one data sheet.
And I just want to mention that in this particular detachment, real quick, it's Storm Guardians, Guardians, Dire Avengers, and Warwalkers also support weapons that are getting a large amount of the benefits. And I mean, you're not always putting these stratagems on Guardian units. You know, sometimes you will, but you're mostly going to put them on front load things like Azurman with Dire Avengers. You're going to front load things like Warwalkers. So, you know, the stratagems aren't always going on Guardian units themselves. Although it's not always a bad idea to, as we'll talk about in a second.
It's the same thing that, like, Imperial's fleet has that problem, where it has good rules, but bad data sheets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually think Guardian detachment is very, very similar to Agents. And that, like, you can look at, like, Guardians and be like, this is a good data sheet. I just don't want to build an army around it, right?
Yes.
Like, I want 1 or 2 squads to, like, screen my backfield. And they're great for that. Like, I'm in the middle of my Eldar group coaching, and the one unit I said I think is mandatory in Eldar list is like a squad of Storm Guardians or something equivalent, because it gives you a scene and it screens your backfield. But I want 1 unit, maybe 2. I don't want 6.
And you don't want your detachment rule and your strats to be based around doing things with those
Guardians.
units. They don't want to do that. They're
No.
scared in that role. They don't know what they're doing. They're like, ah!
That's why you got to bring 5 Warlocks, Jack.
Right.
5
The Warlocks.
The Warlocks will solve all the
5
problems.
Warlocks?
Yeah, because you have a unit of 4 and a unit of 1, and they both join. Because the Conclave's not a character anymore, Jack. It just joined. It's like an Invader ATV.
So the solo Warlock is a different...
Yes. You have the Warlock Conclave, the Solo Warlock, and the Bike Warlock Conclave.
That's dumb. Not good, to be clear. It is dumb, though.
Don't knock it till you try it. Don't knock it till you try it. That's what I say. Guardian Battle Host, I ran this in a 1,000-point game where it was like literally half my points, and it just kept coming back. My opponent could not kill the unit, and because my opponent could not kill the unit, I just kept bringing it back with that stratagem, right? I think it's called In Dire Need or something like that. It's 1 CP. You bring the unit into strategic reserve, and you come back with all the Guardians in it. It's really annoying to fight against. It's really annoying. It's very effective as well.
What is that, like 160 points of Warlocks?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you do it on a Storm Guardian unit, you'll get all your special weapons back. So all that needs to happen is 1 Guardian needs to survive. Because the Warlock Conclave is not a character anymore, you can allocate wounds to the Warlocks if needed. So if your opponent's really laying on the firepower and you have to take out a few Warlocks so that your Guardian survives, you can use the stratagem to bring them back to full health. That's what you do.
No, to get it's not a cheap unit.
Bro, I got all my money tied up in Warlocks right now. I'm not super liquid.
The unit. Also, each Warlock is like $35. If you were to buy the army unit from GW, it'd be like a $400 unit.
Which is true. That's fucked. And I think that obviously GW needs to look at their pricing on that.
That's like the AdMech levels
Yeah,
right there of monies.
Well, no, it'd be like AdMech, but you have to buy 5 Skitarii Marshals to make the Ranger brick work.
Skitarii Marshal at 35. What are we doing?
Warlocks are 45.
Ah.
Yeah.
All right, so
Okay.
that's not ideal.
No, it's not. Moving on to number 7, we have the Seer Council.
So right away, total disagreement on this. I think their reasoning for it, we'll go into it. But whatever the reasoning is, it can't possibly be good enough to put these guys at 7. I just don't see it. They're a fantastic detachment.
So Seer Council has some issues.
It does.
Its detachment rule is that it gets to use its strats a bit more.
A bit more, but not much. Seer Council, I said this day one, and I stand by it completely, is that Seer Council feels like the best detachment in a bad book.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that, but let's move on for a second.
Maybe, like, okay, so its detachment rule would strictly speaking just be better if it read you get +1 CP every turn.
Yeah.
No. Absolutely not. So let's do a little math. Quick math here. There's 5 rounds in a game. Plus 1 CP. You're getting 5 extra CP for the entire game. Seer Council ability allows you to get 6 stratagems for free. So that's already giving you 1 extra CP, essentially, quote unquote, worth of value. Also, it allows you to take Eldrad, which already gives you a CP per turn. So you're already getting that anyway. So that ability, that detachment bonus would be awful. Awful. You do want Eldrad in this.
The other issue is that like you could just take Eldrad and or an Autark and like do it.
Yeah.
Now, it's what's saving it from the bottom is the fact that the strats in Seer Council are quite good.
No, what's saving from the bottom is it can go on things other than Guardians.
True.
You can teleport Dark Reapers.
Or Fire Dragons.
Or Fire Dragons.
Like, Presentiment of Dread, Isha's Fear.
I actually don't think teleporting Guardians is bad. I've run a Guardian Death Star kind of unit with the, 5 Warlocks and Eldrad and, all the fixins in this detachment. And I've teleported places where my opponent can't get me, and I've just blown things off of objectives. They're really good. They're actually quite good. And after you kill something, you can then put Psychic Shield on the unit and make it immune to shooting outside of 18 inches. So, it's not terrible to teleport Guardians around the battlefield if you build it right.
And then I think it's like Webway Portal or whatever the world new lets you teleport around the table. Or like, it's like Psychic, something revealed, I think. Is like, those are all a good
Unshrouded truth, my friend.
strats that I would use a lot. And I do like, but the problem is the army just like isn't doing a thing that Eldar needs to be doing to win games.
Yeah. Well, it's also that like the other detachments are just
You can't shoot me outside of 18 inches on any infantry unit. That's awesome. Straight up, that is insane value for 1 CP. Like, other detachments would kill for that. I mean, the Kroot detachment, for example, it's only Kroot that get it. Right? So, like, that obviously sucks. And also, by the way, guys, I played the Kroot detachment recently. God, I feel sorry for Tau players who want to play that detachment. It's really rough. But, having the ability to just say, no, you can't shoot me outside of 18 inches. I'm back here on an objective, and now you have no way to get that objective from me. That's pretty good.
just doing more powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like Seer Council really wants you to. Man, I wish they actually buffed Psychers in a meaningful way, other than saying all of your strats are tied to Psychers.
Oh, that's the other issue. Is you are like locked into taking like a bunch of Warlocks.
Yeah, which you don't really want to do.
Yeah, I mean,
and there's a
So, like, Warlocks are really good, especially in this detachment. I'd say they're the best in this detachment because of the fact that you can just have so much CP that you can Overwatch constantly, right? Your big Guardian unit with like 5 Warlocks or 4 Warlocks or whatever, that thing not only shoots in your, your shooting phase, but it can Overwatch in your opponent's turn as well. So it becomes a huge kind of denial piece that can lock down huge areas of the board, especially if you position the rest of your army around it to support it, right? So, yeah, I think Warlocks are fine in this detachment. I'm running currently, I think 10 Warlocks in this detachment. And it's basically 4 and 4, so I have 2 units of Guardians, so Guardian Defenders and Storm Guardians with 4 Warlocks in it. I have Eldrad and Farseer. I may make a few tweaks with those units, personally, in the future, but the 2 Singleton Warlocks that I also have in the list are great. They're absolutely fantastic, and those can teleport no matter what, because, they're Psychers themselves. So they're infantry, they're Psychers, you can teleport them anywhere, and they can score you secondary objectives, they can get behind enemy lines, they can just be where your opponent is not, or you can take the Torque of Moray Hague with one of the Warlocks, and you can shut down your opponent's stratagem use, which is really good.
The difference between super powerful strats that only work on Psychers, that would be neat.
Yeah.
But that's not what it is. It's you have a normal suite of strats. They only work near Psychers or only work on Psychers.
Which is fine because you're going to be taking a lot of Psychers in the list anyway, honestly. And even if you didn't want to run the Death Stars, the Singleton Warlocks are cheap enough to where you can kind of just have those. Or Warlock Skyrunners too. It's not bad.
Seer Council really should have been like, its army rule should have been like +1 damage to psychic weapons.
Yeah,
I don't even think that would have been broken.
See, I think that's just too, for me at least, that's a too simplistic way of thinking about it. Like, when I was doing my predictions on what the Uthway detachment was going to be, I thought it was going to be something along those lines, like dev wounds for psychic weapons. And I thought that would be cool thematically, but not incredibly intuitive, like not incredibly like interesting, right? I mean, just giving everything dev wounds is not super interesting. I mean, it's decent. I don't think it's as good necessarily as what the Seer Council has right now. I think 6 free strats across the course of the game is awesome. But yeah, just dev wounds on something, or just +1 damage on what, destructors? It just doesn't seem that good to me, honestly. And I think I would rather have the ability to have extra stratagems than, you know, a little bit of extra damage.
It would, who knows?
I
But
mean, like,
that's not what we got.
Right. I mean, like your warlocks are a little better, like whatever.
We got the worst fate dice of all time. When I first read it, I thought it was per battle round you got those. So you got to just like you making it rain at the club strats. And it's just not the case. You can't get more of the free strats, right? And there's only one way to manipulate which. So the way it works is you roll 6 dice at the start of the game, and you keep those to the side. And each facing represents one of the 6 strats that you get to do for free by spending that die.
Yeah.
You don't get to do it twice, right?
Nope.
No? Okay, cool. And you have to specifically have the strat tied to the die. You cannot get more, and the only way to modify them is by paying for an enhancement.
Which is 30 points and has to go on like a foot warlock.
And
No, it can go on a Farseer as well. And I have it on my Farseer. It is expensive, but it does allow you the basically guarantee of getting the strats you want whenever you want. So I think that is an important strat, you know, enhancement to have in your army as well. It's the Lucid Eye, by the way, and it's pretty good. I think it could stand to be a little bit cheaper, to be honest. I think that is kind of lame that, you know, your ability to dictate the detachment bonus is tied to an enhancement that's like kind of expensive. But, you know, it's needed. The detachment's still really strong, even if it's an extra 5, 10 points over. You know, it's not that big of a deal.
it only modifies 1 per battle round, up or down, 1 facing.
Yeah, but that's all you need, right? I mean, that's really all you need most of the time, unless you're really unlucky. I mean, if you roll 5 1s right off the bat, that really sucks. But, you know, it is what it is. I mean, God, 5 1s would be just terrible, right? You're rolling 6 dice, 5 1s. Oh. But you can manipulate them over the course of the game. And, you know, you can always use your other CP for the stratagems you need outside of that.
Now, like, again, all of the strats are solid. There's no like bad strats in here. And also, like, if you roll some strats, you can just like use your actual CP on other ones. So you can get around to like a little bit.
There we go.
But it's just not a great rule. Like 6 extra CP is something people pay like a 100-point character for.
Yeah.
And it's your entire detachment rule.
I don't know about that because, again, this is 5 battle rounds, so that's only 5 CP, right? So you're getting double the effect. I think that's what you have to... You kind of have to understand this detachment in the way of with Eldrad, right? It's all about how you build the list, how you build up the detachment. It's not necessarily about the rule itself because, I mean, yeah, true. In a normal army, if you didn't have any extra CP generation in any way, 6 extra strats that are random, that you can't choose, you have to roll on them, may seem like a little lackluster, but when you add that to the fact that you have things like Eldrad, you have things like Autarchs that can reduce CP for the unit that they're in, you can just like make it rain like it's in the club, right? I mean, you literally can do that because you just have so many strats to use. I mean, there were turns where I was popping 2 or 3 strats on a single unit, right? Over the course of the entire round. And that was possible because of the detachment bonus, and it made it really hard for my opponents to engage with the units effectively.
Well, we're going to get to a detachment that has a worse detachment rule, but that's a whole nother thing. Yeah. I think Seer Council is such a miss, really. It does not read like a ton of thought was put into that one, whereas a lot of the other ones, a ton of thought was
And I do think that the Seer Council, by the way, is probably one of the best designed detachments in terms of what you can take and kind of what you can do with it. I just have a totally different opinion than these guys about the Seer Council. Having used it, having really been into it, and like looking at the synergies and the tricks you can pull off with it and the different things you can do with it, have just kind of opened my eyes to its potential. And I've played several games with it by now. Guys, it is good. It's solid. I know a guy from the Discord that personally went 4 for 1 at a GT in the UK. Congrats to him. I'll probably try to talk to him about it at some point, about his tournament success. But yeah, I mean, Seer Council's good, guys. I mean, if Seer Council could go 4 for 1 at a GT, it's obviously not crap, right?
Put in
The Stone of Eldritch Fury being like plus 12 range.
to
So
Psychic,
sad.
to Eldritch Storm specifically.
Yeah.
So that's also wrong, but it's not a big deal. It's any psyker, any psychic weapon. So warlocks can also get the benefit. I don't know why you would want a 24-inch flamer, but you know, 24-inch Overwatch with Destructor, I mean, it could be good against like something out there, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel
It's
like
not
if you're
that
gonna
good.
make a Seer Council detachment, you can have fun with that, right? You can do things like, say, you know, the warlock, if you join a squad of bikes, makes them psychers in some way and
Yeah.
does a thing, or if it joins whatever, you become psychers and you do cool stuff and you get bonus damage or whatever that makes you want to take these units that you don't necessarily want to take.
I feel like we got that though. I feel like we got exactly that. Like you join warlocks to a squad of guardians. You don't necessarily want to take a bunch of guardians, but all of a sudden with the warlocks, they become really good because now they can just be targeted by a bunch of stratagems and they can become insanely effective at basically everything. They can become great at killing stuff. They become great at surviving damage, you know? They can teleport around, so they're super mobile, you know? I just feel like that's exactly what we got.
Whereas you just get some free strats with a lot of strings attached is not.
Honestly,
Only one string. You just need to be within 9 inches of a psyker, which if it's in your own unit, you're within. And then if you are a psyker, you're within. And then if it's another unit, well, you have a good amount of, you know, abilities to teleport something. Like you could use Unshrouded Truth to teleport a psyker near a unit, and then you could buff them with, you know, your other stratagems, right? So like a good trick I would do was I'd put a unit off to the side, and then I would use a stratagem. I'd use Unshrouded Truth to teleport a single warlock over there nearby that unit. And then if my opponent wanted to shoot that unit outside of 18 inches, I could just put up Psychic Shield, right? So yeah, you just got to think of the possibilities here. It's not too difficult once you actually play it several times. It is kind of hard to get the grip of it like right away, though. I will say that because my first 1,000-point game with it, I wasn't really working with a lot of models. It's a little bit different, but at 2K, I really had to think deeply in my list building how I was going to actually make the entire army be affected by stratagems turn after turn. And, you know, I found out that, yeah, you do want a few singleton warlocks in your army for that purpose.
Really what you want.
psyker units, real ones to hit and wound,
Yeah.
would have been like a great.
Yeah, that's Librarius Conclave right there,
Yeah.
basically.
I don't really even think that would have been crazy.
Warlocks and Farseers can't join anything that impressive. Like, they can join bike squads. Cool. Windrider Host is better at that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's interesting, but I definitely think it's a mess.
No, I agree. It's not that great.
So I think it's just basically what it comes down to is just a fundamental disagreement on are Guardians good enough to invest points in, right? Do you invest in the Warlock Conclave with the Farseer or the, you know, or Eldrad? I think you can, and it could be very good in a number of detachments. Maybe you don't go with the full Warlock Conclave in every detachment, or maybe you just, you know, go with the, you know, single unit of Guardians is enough for some detachments. But for these two detachments with Guardian Battle Host and Seer Council, you definitely want to do that because it adds a lot more value to the unit. And the unit's already, you know, can already be targeted by a bunch of really effective, cool stratagems that are going to just make it an absolute beast.
All right.
It is better than Guardians just in that it can buff non-Guardian units.
Yes. A detachment with the worst detachment rule in the book,
Yeah.
Ghosts of the Webway. These are Harlequins, and man, I love my Harlequins, but the detachment rule is by far the worst part of the.
You got the extra OC, which is like cute.
Yeah,
I kind of want to say that Ghost of the Webway is better than Spear Conclave, but I'm very on the fence about that. So I won't really go into it. I think Harlequins are definitely in either the 5 or 6 spot. If we're discounting Armored Warhost, which by the way, Armored Warhost, they're not even talking about it, but it's obviously the worst, right? And we can clearly see that. It's number 9. So I think Ghost of the Webway is really either number 5 or number 6. I don't know if it's number 6, but, you know, it's not terrible. I think it's a great detachment, but it only really works in one way. It's not very multi-dimensional, and I think that's you know, as far as the units it can pick, as far as the army composition, and that's kind of where I kind of fall on it. I think it is really good though, and I think it's a massive improvement to what we had last edition, or sorry, in the index. It feels like last edition with all the changes, but yeah, I just feel like it's maybe a little bit too one-dimensional, but I still think it's super competitive and it can definitely win tournaments and things like that because, you know, a good player with this type of list can really go far.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is troops are kind of unplayable without it.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so you kind of need that. And the detachment rule is you get to charge through models. Yip-de-doo.
Yay, that matters like once a tournament.
They could have, yes, they could have put that on flip belts and you would not have noticed because flip belts let you move over everything every other time.
Yeah.
And then they're like, but in Ghosts of the Webway, you get to charge over models. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's not a particular. I mean, like it is occasionally useful, but it's the kind of problem that you could solve if you just like stop and like position your models a little better, more than like.
I would say it's a little more useful than these guys are saying. Obviously, in most scenarios, you're not going to use it, but for at least for me, you know, it does come up sometimes, right? Like it does come up. People do try to screen you. My buddy, for example, that I always play against, is always trying to throw his vehicles, his rhinos and stuff, in front of my models so that I can't, you know, hit the squad that's behind them. And so I do think that does come up. You know, yeah, you can position your models correctly, but if you don't roll a high charge roll, for example, and you can't exactly, you know, maybe move around the unit that's in front of you, then being able to just move over it does save you some inches. I don't know. I don't think it's a great army rule, but I don't think it's a terrible one either.
Oh dang! I can charge over models. What am I doing here?
Yeah, it doesn't. It occasionally will come up, and by occasionally I mean really occasionally.
Yeah.
The real benefit of the detachment is you get to take 3 each of the
Troop masters.
Troop masters. Troop masters is the big one.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, troop masters are very good now, as opposed to before the codex came out, where they were.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry, but they were good. They were good. They were only 55 points, and they gave the unit dev wounds. I mean, that was pretty good in the index. I thought they were good.
I think troop masters are like the best part of Harlequins.
Yeah, they're hit
so good,
quite hard, and they reroll ones to hit, +1 to wound.
Obviously, they're better
and then
now,
they
though,
give the
right?
unit consolidate 6, so you can get back towards an objective and then get back in a boat afterwards. It really enables that whole playstyle, and it also lets a unit come out of a boat and do real damage, as opposed to 6 Harlequins coming out of a boat and doing, you know,
the
not
troop
bad.
master is very similar to the autarch if the troops are the banshees. And what I mean by that is 5 banshees like doesn't do enough, 5 troops doesn't do enough, but they're like almost there. And just by adding like a character, it doesn't like dramatically increase the cost or the shape of the unit, but it pushes them over the like damage threshold considerably.
Yeah, an extra fusion pistol that hits on a 2 is pretty huge. And then having a guy who go in and scoop like 3 Space Marines before the rest of the squad fights is actually very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And you just get back in a boat afterwards, and you can do that over and over and over again. And that's the real detachment rule of Harlequins, by the way, is that Starweavers scoop you up at the end of the fight phase if you are... There's some strings attached, but largely if every model's within 6, you just get back in that boat. And that's the real detachment rule, is that you just send out units. You send out like 4 or 5 units. You'll see this in the game if you watch the game that I
Yeah, so I actually watched this game, and this is exactly how they played. If you were playing Mono Quins in the Index, this is exactly what they did before. The only difference is that in the Index, unfortunately, they didn't hit as quite as hard, but you know, they still were able to get the job done most of the times against, Marines in general, not always, but in general. And then you just, pop them back in the Star Weavers afterward. So the idea is stage all your Star Weavers behind ruins, behind ruined footprints, and then, you charge out of those, you come back, and you're within 6 inches of, your Star Weaver, and you hop back in it. That's the idea. And you just out activate your opponent over the course of the game.
I played my Harlequins against Richard's Votan. You'll see I sent out like 3 units. At the end of the turn, they all got back in boats. And then the following turn, I sent out 3 more units, and then they all got back in boats. And that's the real business there. The enhancements are decent. Checker X Coil is expensive, but you need a little bit more damage just to peck away at people. It's quite a good enhancement. And then the, I forget exactly what it's called, but the Dark Reaper, not the Dark Reaper, the Death Jester, getting crits on every hit against anything below half strength. Ordinarily, that'd be a pretty bad enhancement in most detachments, but because Quins are just like poke until you fall over, and then poke until you fall over, and death by 1,000 cuts. He usually gets a chance to finish something off that got cut below 50%. So that's pretty good. The strats are very solid and do basically what Harlequins are looking to do, which is like overwhelm your opponent with a lot of different movement tricks. So it's a solid detachment. I just wish the detachment rule were like anything else.
I mean, like the detachment rule probably could have just been like -1 to hit across the board.
That was my thought. It was just Harlequins are just -1.
That also would have helped their biggest issue, which is they're just like so unrelentingly fragile.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, that would be better, right? -1 to hit across the board would just be better. But I don't know. I kind of think that would be a little too strong because they basically had this in 9th edition with the Light Sideth, and they were super OP, right? They had access to Lone Operative essentially back then, which was you just can't target them within 12 or 18. I think it was mostly 18, but I think it was 12 at one point in the game, but then they nerfed it to 18. And on top of that, you are at -1 to hit across the board. It just wasn't very interactive. It wasn't very fun for a lot of people. And, Harlequins at that time were like 50 plus, high 50% win rate, like 58% win rate. And earlier on, when the Aeldari book first came out, they were actually at an obscene win rate. I think they had like a 60 or 70% win rate, which was just, it was just bonkers, man. It was really crazy. So I don't think -1 to hit's the answer there. I think, they already get -1 to hit in combat. They can choose to be at -1 to hit in combat with their, Harlequin abilities. So I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't think that's a good sub. I think maybe Advance in Charge would be nice, but maybe a little bit too strong. I don't know. I think it'd be probably fine, but it would be a little strong. Maybe not Advance in Charge, but maybe they get, a bonus to their advance. No, that's bad. Never mind. Maybe they get like some sort of like speed bonus or some sort of like bonus to their, on charge abilities. Maybe they get something. I don't know. But I kind of like charge through. You know what it should have been though? It should have just been, instead of, charge through enemy units, they should have gotten like a plus distance to their charge roll. I think that would have been probably better, honestly. If they got like a +2 to their charge distance or +1 even, would have probably been the better call there. Because then they could just, kind of move around at that point if they have a greater charge distance.
Yeah, like Harlequins in 9th edition, I mean, not even when they were like 9 Void Weavers, blah, blah, blah. Like Harlequins towards the end of the edition, when they were balanced, their thing was they were like weirdly durable, right?
Yeah.
No rerolls to hit, -1 to hit, maybe even, you hit me on 4s, even no matter what. And so they were really annoying to hit, and then they had some rerolls after that. But once you got through, they were toughness 3/1 wound, or 6 wounds on the boats or whatever. And now they just are 1 wound toughness 3 or 6 wounds on the boats, but none of that durability is there. So they are incredibly fragile. And that's what actually, legitimately, that is what makes this, in our opinion, the third worst detachment.
It's just like too fragile.
It's too fragile.
It's just too fragile.
Yeah, and I mean, that's Eldar for you, right? Like, a lot of the Eldari detachments, aside from Spirit Conclave, are just really fragile. I would say maybe except for Spirit Conclave and probably Seer Council, just because you can Psychic Shield things and, you have those Warlocks to give you -1 to wound. But other than that, you're pretty fragile across the board. Harlequins do get a 4+ invul save. I mean, they should be fragile, right? Because they do hit hard. So I think that's the trade-off. I think to be balanced, armies need a trade-off. If the army doesn't have a trade-off, then obviously it's just going to be really strong and kind of broken, right? So there needs to be some weaknesses there.
You can swarm your opponent and hit them really hard, and you really can, because there's a million activations, and every activation does damage. And so by the end of it, your opponent's picked up like 6 units. And then the dregs of their army hits you back and reduces you to the dregs of your army, because you just are 5 dudes that die to bolters, right? And a boat is like 1 meltagun away from dying.
Yeah.
And it's a real issue. And there's just not really the units there to support that kind of play style past like a couple turns of impacting with the enemy. You can still win games. 100% you can win games. I won the game into Richard's Votan, but it was very close.
Yeah, and I actually think, believe it or not, Votan is one of the counters to Harlequins because they are toughness 5. So they are harder to wound than normal. So you're not always going to kill your target. But, I watched this game. He was always able to kill the target with his Quins, and the Quins just hop back in boats, and he did eventually win. And it's not going to be like a blowout where the opponent just has nothing they can do against you. But, you out-activate your opponent, and that's how you win, and that's exactly how he won, right? So I think, and by the way, if you guys want to see that game, definitely check it out. It's, Harlequins versus Votan on the Art of War channel. It's a good battle report, and it kind of shows you exactly how the Quins want to play on the battlefield. So I do, give them a shout out for that one, because that was quite good.
It's just, man, over a tournament?
I think there's a lot of variance here. I think you can do it, but it's going to require you to play very well and for you to not just like get lucky, but just like not get unlucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you need to consistently play better than your opponent, which is like fine. That's most armies need to play consistently better than their opponent to win an event. But like, you can't slip up and then your army catches you, right? It's like, oh, oops, sorry, half your army disappeared in a hail of bullets.
Yeah, a hail of like a tactical squad is like death to Harlequins.
Yeah, tactical squad can, like, a squad of 5 intercessors will pick up a unit a turn every turn, and then they'll charge and pick up a second unit.
Yeah.
Right? So they just shoot 1 unit to death, charge 1 unit to death every single turn. Your opponent doesn't have dead units.
Well, actually, yes, they can shoot you to death, but they can't charge you to death because they only have 3 attacks apiece on charge. So the math doesn't quite work out for that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, a squad of intercessors can kill you. The trick is kill the intercessors first because you have faster units that are immune to Overwatch because of battle focus tokens. So typically speaking, those units aren't going to be that big of a deal if you play correctly.
In that matchup.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I think it's good into other elves, though.
I agree.
Yeah. Because you can kill them, they can kill you. You
have more units.
Equally as fast, and you have more units. Yeah. So it's a good place to be in the meta, honestly.
We have some super chats. Gabriel, Ruth, Quinn.
We're going to skip these, and we're just going to go on to number 5.
Okay, moving on. We have our next one. We have the Spirit Conclave.
Spirit
Conclave.
I just want to say before they start talking about it, I'm becoming more of a fan of it. Just because I think it does something that Eldar don't traditionally do, which is score primary, which is great. I think it's a good place to be for Eldar, and having a detachment that can actually do that successfully is awesome.
So the detachment rule is it gives the Wraith units battle focus, right?
So the detachment rule is that, which is like the important one that you take it for, that makes Wraiths much, much, much better than they are in other archetypes. The other part of it is if an enemy unit kills a Psyker model, then you get +1 to hit and wound with your Wraith units against that target.
That's not nothing.
It's not nothing. It's not like, I wouldn't take it for that alone, but that coupled with the battle focus on Wraiths makes them much better.
Yeah, the one downside of that is it's kind of duplicate with the buff that they get for being near Psychers, right? Because the
Yes.
Wraith Lord is +1 weapon skill, ballistic skill. Weirdly enough, I don't understand that. It's +1 weapon skill, ballistic skill if it's within 12 inches of a Psyker.
So the reason why that's there is because the Wraith Lord is an Aeldari hero. And unlike the regular Wraith Guard and Wraith Blades, a little bit of lore thing for you guys out there, is that the Wraith Lord is actually a mythical hero or legendary hero of old. And so that's why it's +1 ballistic skill, weapon skill. I guarantee you it wasn't just a typo, it was deliberate. The Wraith Lord is supposed to be better.
So then if you kill a Psyker, it also gets +1 to hit and wound. And that's nasty.
Yeah.
But if you're Wraith Blade or Wraith Guard, you get +1 to hit if you're within range of a Psyker. So that doesn't stack well.
So it doesn't stack well, but it lets you do a few things. The first is if someone kills all your Psychers, then you're not just like turbo boned, right? Because
Yeah.
you still have +1 to hit.
I assume that was the idea.
I
right?
agree.
Yeah.
I think also if you like want to send someone out independently, you can do that.
Yeah.
Or if someone has -1 to hit, the race only on 4 base, so that can be really bad to them. So you can get around that. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. It does require you to like lose Psychers.
Yeah, I remember in our game, you just took a bunch of Psychers with the idea of throwing them away, and then you really kind of didn't even want to throw them away.
No. So what I've done in my list is I've cut down quite significantly the number of Psychers that I've taken. And just been like, if you kill them, I have a nice bonus, but I'm not gonna like make it a plan.
Yeah.
The other big thing is that I really do not like the spirits here elsewhere because her buffs, she is only good if she's buffing a variety of Wraith units because she does no damage and does nothing aside from buff pieces. So if you take like 1 unit of Wraith Blades and a Spirit Seer, you're just tacking 65 points onto the cost of the Wraith Blades.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
But if you're taking like 3 Wraith Lords and 4 units of Wraith Blades, having a Spirit Seer or 2 suddenly becomes like really valuable. And then there's an enhancement in here called Light of Clarity, which is pick a unit and it gets +1 OC for each infantry model in the unit, or +3 OC to each monster model in the unit. And
Yeah, I think this enhancement's actually pretty good, and unfortunately it's expensive, but it is good, and I think it's important to have in the army. I unfortunately, I didn't take it in my 2K game when I played the Spear Conclave, but I do think that was a mistake. It did cost me 5 victory points, so it was a 10-point swing altogether because my opponent ended up scoring that objective, unfortunately, but, you know, that's how it goes sometimes. Live and learn.
And that suddenly makes Wraith Lords OC 6 and Wraith Blades OC 2, and that's the point that this army can actually like consistently hold primary.
Yeah, you just like you res a model in the unit and you give them bonus OC. So you can go from 4 OC on an objective to 10.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to play around everywhere.
It's also the nice part about it is that like all of the auras are 12 inches. So you just like put a Psyker in the middle of the table and you get like your entire army.
Yeah. The real strength of this detachment is something we haven't even mentioned yet.
Yeah.
It's 1 CP minus 1 damage.
Shooting in fight phase.
Shooting in fight phase. It's ridiculous. That strat is gross.
You use 10 command points on that strat. Like
Yes.
legitimately.
When your opponent hits you with credible shooting, you pop it. When your opponent hits you with credible combat, you pop it. It's huge because flat damage 3 would have been awful for you otherwise. Like Breaker Boys run in and go.
No, I mean like that strat single-handedly makes this detachment playable. Because it means that like one Forge Fiend does not like kill you.
No, it requires.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's definitely true. I think one of the biggest weaknesses of index rates was damage 3 weapons. They just took you apart. And luckily, we have that stratagem in this detachment, so you don't have to really worry about that as much.
Like, you get shot by the Forge Fiend, you go -1 damage that you don't easily get, like, wiped out. And then you move with the detachment rule, you spend a token, move D6 +1 behind a wall. You then heal a guy up, walk back out, and charge or something. And that is something that the Wraiths none of that is anything the Wraiths would have had without the detachment.
No, we like Wraith Lords and other detachments. I don't like any of the other Wraith units. I think they're all quite solid. I think this is a solid detachment.
I think it's pretty good, honestly. You get a
I think the D sites, the Wraith Guard with D sites are pretty good in other detachments, but yeah, for the most part, I think the Blades and the, Wraith Guard with the Wraith Cannons just aren't really that good. And Wraith Knight as well, I don't think is that great in other detachments. It's best in this detachment here.
lot of Wraiths. And
Like
a lot. You can tune the list to either just be Wraith tied,
Mhm.
where you're like, I will have 8 units of Wraiths.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing else.
Yeah.
Like nothing else but catch. And maybe in teams, I think that could be a really good list if people aren't ready for it. It's just you hammer the -1 damage button whenever your opponent hits you, and you just have like 40 toughness 6 Terminators basically with
And-
-1 damage
Some
and
come back to
healing.
life. And,
3 of them come back to life every turn. Like that's real nasty.
So my current list is like 3 Wraith Lords, 2 Spirit Seers, 3 Bike Locks, and then like 4 units of Wraith Blades. I think there's like 1 unit of Flamer Guard in there for Overwatch. And then it's like the rest of the points are divided by like trash bikes and stuff, so I can like do things early on with their speed, and then like a bunch of Fire Dragons to kill vehicles.
Yeah.
I don't know how he's fitting all that in there, but I definitely couldn't. I definitely couldn't fit all of that in there, but yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. What you want to essentially run is, about 4 or 5 units of Wraiths. You want to probably run a couple Spirit Seers, couple, Warlocks on Jet Bike, Warlock Skyrunners, and, some Shroud Runners perhaps, or things like, just regular Jet Bikes. I like the Shroud Runners better personally. And then maybe some, anti-tank elements. I like Wraith Lords of Bright Lances just fine, but it is true. They hit hard against most vehicles, but against those extra tough vehicles, Fire Dragons do a little bit better for the points. So I think, having a unit of 5 Fire Dragons in there isn't a bad idea either.
I think there's a build in there where you take 3 Spirit Seers and then divide the rest of your list by Wraiths. And you don't try to be dynamic, you don't try to be fast, you don't try to be cute. You just glom objectives and you don't give them up, and you Light of Clarity the moment your opponent tries to touch them.
Yeah.
And that is also really good. Wraith Lords are really solid as well because they are cheap. We'll touch on this in the future. Next week, there's an Eldar data sheets tier list that we'll be doing. And that one, Wraith Lords are going to be pretty high up there. Pretty high up there.
Yeah.
They're really good. So you can put those.
Thank God. I told you guys. I told you they were good. They're great. Wraith Lords are awesome.
In as well. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but it's durability skew that Eldar doesn't normally do, which is it's interesting.
It is.
I think it's a well-designed detachment for
I
sure
agree.
for
Like
making Wraiths
I don't
happen.
think it's like super strong. I don't think it's like so strong that it's broken. I think it is good and effective and like does what it wants to do well.
Yeah, we've gotten to solid tier.
Yeah, I would say like all of the detachments in this book are like playable. These are all like good. There are some that are very good later on.
Yes. So Spirit Conclave, if you took that to a local event, I would expect you to go either X1 or undefeated.
This is the best that like mono wraiths has been for the last several editions.
Yeah.
I would argue and say it's the best it's ever been. Hot take. And I've played this army in 3rd edition, by the way. I played a Wraith army in 3rd edition. Well, it wasn't a full Wraith army, but 2 Wraith Lords and like 2 units of 10 Wraith Guard, which is basically a full army of Wraiths at the time for 1,500 points.
Yeah. So it's that's pretty cool. Also, Wraith Blades are a lot better now.
They're way better. The sword ones are like legitimately quite good.
They have a lot of attacks. And you give them sustained hits, and
Yeah, they're just a good unit.
it works. We've got Stephen Bus Photography.
We'll skip the super chats, of course.
All right. Next up, after Spirit Conclave, we've got Windrider Host. Oh, look at these funny new graphics, Quentin. Well done.
I know, thank you. I also put a lot of work into those. I made them an hour ago. So if you want to do damage to your opponent, if you want to walk up to the game table and say, hey, you, opponent, you have models on the table, and I don't like that. I take personal offense to other models on this game of 40K table.
This is my table,
This is my
and you
table.
will not have models on it.
This is the detachment for you. It hits, and I cannot stress this enough, so unbelievably hard.
The strats are ridiculous.
They're ridiculous.
The detachment rules, it teleports around.
It teleports around, yeah.
It's just solid.
And you can come in a little early, so you can hit your opponent with like 36 Windrider jetbikes turn 1.
And they also become battle line in this.
So yeah, so you take 36.
That's, yeah, because they're the best part. They get full rerolls to hit against the closest.
I don't know if you want to take 36, but you definitely want to take a lot of them.
Eligible target.
Mhm.
And
There's a strat for real wounds.
There's a strat for real
plus 1
wounds
AP.
and a strat for plus 1
so
AP.
your scatter bikes show up, or your cannon bikes or whatever. Your scatter bikes show up and it's 36 shots, real hits, real wounds, sustained, AP2, ignore cover,
Lethal.
or no, they're not lethal in this detachment.
Sorry, not scatter. The
shurikens are lethal.
The shuriken cannons
They're
are lethal.
AP3, ignore cover, lethal.
Yeah,
like,
with rerolls to hit and rerolls to wound and ignores cover because you put a warlock in there.
Yeah.
Whew.
They're quite good.
Yes. The main issue is each one is a Space Marine Scout.
It's a Space Marine Scout. The other issue is that there is a Fire and Fade strat. That is good. The problem is the units can be quite big and the ranges can be quite short.
And you move 7 on the Fire and Fade.
So yes, I've kind of done this a little bit though, and I've kind of been able to actually. So it is possible to move a unit of 8 with a single Warlock Skyrunner, 6 jet bikes, and a Farseer Skyrunner from the right-hand side of a footprint all the way to the back of the footprint behind it again with 7 inches. So it's possible. It's just you can't do anything insane, right? But you could also just move through the footprint area without the wall on a lot of cases, and that's kind of where you want to position them most of the time if you're not bringing them through reserves.
The other issue is that if you say you're playing against like sisters or whatever, and you want to shoot at the Volgons, and you're like, well, I want to kill these Volgons, so I'm probably going to want to take real hits. I need real hits, but in front of the Volgons is an Immolator. So you have to like consolidate your Kamehameha together to kill the Simulator, and then 5 Battle Sisters pop out. But like one Windrider Jetbike unit doesn't always kill the Immolator. The army's good because it has 6 of these things. So you've sacrificed 2 squads of Windrider Jetbikes to kill an Immolator. That's great. Then the 3rd unit shoots to kill these Battle Sisters, and then the 4th unit of Windrider Jetbikes shoots, and you probably kill Morphin Volsville Paragons. And then the Castigators pop out and kill all 36 Windrider Jetbikes.
The problem is...
Well, they're not going to kill all 36. I guess that's hyperbole, right? But they'll kill quite a few in return. So what you have to do is you have to synchronize your jet bikes with some anti-tank elements. So you're probably taking a couple of other units in the list too. You know, I think Vipers are pretty good in the list, but also Warwalkers seem to be pretty good because they give you that -1 AP and they can hit tanks. So, you know, you hit something with a Warwalker and that makes it a lot easier for your jet bikes to actually kill that target. And then whatever's inside of the transport can just be cleaned up like normal.
Durability again.
Yeah.
Like, they are really good if you get to just activate into your opponent even twice.
Yes.
Like, if you get to shoot your opponent with this army twice, they are dead, and we can just move on.
If you get 2 full shooting activations, you will table any army in the game.
It, pretty close.
much,
Like,
yeah.
it depends. There's some exceptions, but you will at least make it to the point where they are no longer a credible threat to deal with you anymore. The problem is your opponent is also playing the game of 40k and will be trying to not make this happen. And your units are super fragile.
Unbelievably fragile.
Like, let me put it this way. If I drop a squad of Plasma Inceptors down in my Angelic Inheritors list, make them characters so they reroll 1s to hit, and split fire, I'm killing 2 units.
Yes.
And that's not great when the units are big and they are chonky and they move 7 when they...
And I actually don't really think you kill 2 units of 6. I mean, maybe 2 units of 3, but not 2 units of 6 because you do have the 4+ invul stratagem that you can use. So there is that, right? So yeah, I mean, you kill most of them, but you don't sometimes kill all of them. And maybe, you know, sometimes you just need like 1 or 2 jet bikes to live so that you could, you know, run interference, score secondary objectives, continue to, you know, lay firepower upon your opponent, you know. So yeah, in most situations, when you bring in something and they kill something and your opponent has something to, you know, retaliate against them, it will die. But I think the Windrider host is just going to keep doing this turn after turn. And then somebody in the Discord, a buddy of mine in the Discord, ended up, you know, kind of revealing about the Windrider host is secret missions, right? And keeping one of your big units with your Warlord in reserve until the last couple turns of the game, you know, using your detachment ability to bring them back into reserve, turn 4, come in turn 5, or no, it would, yeah, you would pull them out turn 4 and then, you know, put them back in turn 5 and be able to, you know, basically wipe something off an objective and then have another unit come on top of it. It was something like that. We'll talk about it in a future video, but yeah, that way you can basically guarantee that you are scoring that secret mission at the end of the game and getting a little bit of a primary bonus there.
They fire and fade, which means almost always, and take this from a guy who played a bunch of Windrider jet bikes for months, like one unit of 6 with 2 characters in it, the 8, and it fire and faded 14, not 7, 14. They were still kind of hard to hide.
Yeah.
Because the unit is like this big, sticks out in a bunch of weird random directions, and you have to move it entirely behind terrain after getting the line of sight you want. Not super easy.
There are a lot of units in this book, the chief amongst them being the Wave Serpent, where if they were, instead of a model with physical space, a single finite point, they would be so much better.
Yes, the Wave Serpent is literally this big.
Yeah, it's huge.
And it's a big circle, which means you can't hide behind anything. That's a whole nother topic for a detachment coming up
later.
Raptor
Jack, Marines Deso or 2 whirlwinds into Anvil, in Anvil into Eldar Cheers.
We'll skip that a little bit.
It's the name of the guy.
It's the name of the guy inside.
What's the name of the plane?
I think it's like the Nightshade Interceptor. Is the name of the plane.
Sure, but the guy inside is a Crimson Hunter.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's the bike's big, and somebody in chat points it out. It's because it overhangs the base by a significant amount.
Yeah.
And then all the other bikes, the Shroud Runners and Shining Spears, God rest their soul,
and Skyweavers.
And Skyweavers too, are
60s?
on 60s, and you're just not hiding that.
Yeah, no.
Not relevantly anyway. Like, Shining Spears, a unit of 6 Shining Spears can hide in your backfield.
Yeah, you don't want to take a unit of 6 Shining Spears typically. You want to usually take 3 because you can hide them, right? 6 Shining Spears is way too hard to hide and way too fragile.
Sure. And can go super far and charge pretty unreliably hard, I will say. Are there any reliability things in there for melee?
Let's find
out. I don't think so. I remember there not being any, but I don't want to state there are none without double checking. The main issue with Shining Spears is they can hit hard, but they're just hitting on 3s, and they are just wounding on 3s, and it's like 18 attacks, and at 240 point units, like, I don't really want to be just wagering that on
okay, so I have good news and I have bad news.
Probably only take
you can give them real wounds, but you must be set up on the battlefield that turn. So you have to come down, make the charge. One of those 7 battlefield reserves this turn and not been executed to fight this.
Okay, so you got to drop and make a 9. Is what I'm hearing.
So what you actually do is you drop down, you shoot someone, you use the overflight strat to move 7 closer to your opponent because there's no charge restriction. Then you charge with real wounds.
You have to kill something with that.
You do, yes.
Okay, so you drop down with your Shining Spears. You find something to kill. Mind you,
you cannot shoot their lances.
Right, because they're 6-inch range, and then you move 7, and then you charge, and then you get reroll wounds, and then they're worth it.
Maybe.
Probably.
Probably worth it. It isn't too hard.
I think they're thinking about this the wrong way. I think you run 3-man squads of Shining Spears, and you just run them as a countercharge unit to anything that wants to enter your deployment zone. Because remember, a lot of your units aren't going to be really, focusing too much on screening. They're going to be focusing on getting to the enemy's backfield, destroying their units, stuff like that, right? So there might not be a ton of units on the battlefield at any one time that are going to be on your side of the battlefield. They're all going to be either in the middle of the battlefield or your opponent's side. So having a couple units of Shining Spears to countercharge things and, deal some good damage to things that can come from reserve that are a little bit more tanky I don't think is a bad thing. I think they're actually pretty good value in this detachment. They move really fast, and advance and charge is great. They have an advance and charge strat, and that makes them like bullets. They can just go across the battlefield. They can ignore terrain when they move through it. Adding D6 to their movement, which is already 14 inches, and they could just, and it could be more too because of battle focus. They could just absolutely zip across the battlefield. So I do think they are pretty good, just not in squads of 6.
140 point unit that will die to like 1 heavy bolter.
They also don't have an aspect shrine token, which means they are even less reliable than normal, and they're huge. And crucially, they are not tough either.
They are
a space marine.
This is also sucking up the 2 best strats in this detachment from your Windriders.
Yeah, they are 40-point Space Marines. They are a 2-wound toughness 4 model with a 3-up armor save and a 5-up invuln. Don't forget. So the problem is it's just out of whack there. Honestly, you're going to be losing way too much of your army anytime your opponent like brushes up against you, and that's a real issue for units as expensive as that. Especially when your primary game plan is to get in shootouts with people. Not really what I want to be doing. Like, you want to be getting in shootouts with like Vindicators and Ballistas and Predators. Got a Predator into this.
One Castigator like tables this army.
Like, it's the same thing as the Harlequins, right?
Yeah.
You do a bunch of damage to your
Yeah, again, I think a Castigator probably kills like 1 squad of bikes, 1 squad of 6. Because you just throw up the 4-up invul save, and it just you're not going to be able to realistically say, oh, I'm going to split fire because, well, whatever the cannon's going to shoot at, the Castigator cannon, you're just going to 4-up invul save it, and you're going to mitigate a lot of that damage. So, again, I think it's kind of hyperbole. An opponent that has really strong stuff, yeah, they're going to be able to kill several units probably, but they're not going to be able to kill your whole army in one go, right?
opponent, and then your opponent hits you back and goes, that's 4 units of bikes dead.
Yep.
You go, ah!
It does hit really hard, though.
It does hit really hard. It has a place. You can make a good singles list. It just has weaknesses, as all armies do.
Yes.
And you can make a great teams list. If your opponent brings 300 guard bodies, they get blasted into another dimension.
Does 36 scatter bikes get all 300 in 2 turns? I think
In
it might.
2 turns?
In 2 turns, I think it does.
it does get them in 2 turns.
Yeah. Whew. Okay, moving on to the kind of the top ones.
Yep.
The general consensus.
This is the top 3. So
Top
these
three.
are the
good
primo
ones. Yeah,
ones.
the primo ones.
I think this ranking is going to be a little
Very spicy right here.
little spicy.
yeah.
Spice.
Warhost is as the number 5.
Number
Third-
3.
third
Number
from the
3.
top,
Number 3.
Yeah.
All right. So you recently played this to an RT team.
I did, and after having played a bunch of Aspect, Warhost, and Ynnari, I have really been underwhelmed by Warhost.
You didn't go 3-0 with that RTT.
That is technically true.
Yes,
I did go 2-0 and then had to drop.
Yes, you had
So, yeah.
But yeah, so with this and Aspect Host are very similar.
They're so similar.
They are basically the same detachments that the sliders slightly shifted.
Yeah. It's do you want to do a little more damage or move a little faster?
Right. And have fallback and shoot or charge is pretty good as well.
It's a useful strat.
That's actually what I think there's 2 stratagems that I think set Warhost apart from Aspect Host, and that's why I'd probably switch them here. And I think it's the fallback and shoot and charge strat, 1. And 2, I think it's the webway gate strat that Warhost has. That just kind of sets it over. Because Warhost, I mean, you can take just so many more different types of units. And there's really only one way to play Aspect Host, and there's a lot of different possibilities for Warhost. And you can play a little bit more intuitively in Warhost, I feel, because you have those extra, mobility strats and stuff like that, and those things do come up in the game quite often. I've found that, I need an extra inch to be able to make this charge. Well, 3 inches of bonus movement for battle focus versus 2 inches is actually going to give me a safer charge, right? A more reliable charge. Or, being able to just move a unit of rates from your backfield, defending your backfield against Overwatch in the first couple turns, to your enemy's backfield, shoot them, and then Overwatch them is just fantastic. So the fact that in a Warhost detachment you can take some of these other units and have great success with them is why I think Warhost is better than Aspect Host. But yeah, Aspect Host obviously has more straight up damage than Warhost does.
The main issue with Warhost as opposed to Aspect Host is you kind of need the damage and the reliability.
There were many times that I was like, man, I left one guy alive. Okay, here's a perfect example of why I think Aspect is better. I had Jane Czar charge into a 1-wound Eviscer, and she was like, I will swing now, and then she was like 4 ones to hit. And the Eviscer was like, I survived, you're dead now.
Yep.
And
Okay, I thought I was going to get a good example there. I don't know if you guys thought that too. That is an awful example. Jane Czar has 8 attacks. So even if you do roll 4 ones, you're still swinging with 4 wounds, wounding on 3+, and they only have a 4+ invul save. I don't know what's going on here. You're re-rolling your wounds because Janesar re-rolls wounds against characters. So you're forcing like 4 invul saves probably on this Abyssor assassin with only 1 wound left. How did that happen? That must have been really, really unlucky. That's like one of those bizarre cases that's like, yeah, that probably happens once in every 50 games. And it just kind of sucks to be you if it happens to you, and that's just Warhammer, you know? So I wouldn't base, I wouldn't base it on that example. Now, what I will say is, again, stuff like Catan shards, Rogaldorn battle tanks, things that can like negate your damage. Fire dragons, being able to just blow through that stuff is fantastic. That is awesome. But you are missing out on a lot of the mobility that the list provides, a lot of, basically move, shoot, move stuff. Warhost also has Fire and Fade. You could just move any infantry unit D6+1, which is really powerful, right? You do have Skyborn Sanctuary in Warhost as well, and, it's just, I guess it really just comes down to your philosophy on what makes an army effective, and it is matchup dependent as well. Like, if you're going against, 6 Satan shards, if you're in a meta with a bunch of Necrons that are running a bunch of Satan, or an Imperial Guard meta with, like, triple Rogaldorn all over the place, yeah, you're probably going to want to bring Aspect Host, because your units are going to be able to just punch so much harder against those tough targets. But I think in a lot of matchups, the damage is actually so negligible, that it doesn't end up mattering. Like, if you take a unit of Banshees, for example, they're hitting on a 2. They have, between all the Banshees and the 5-man unit, they'd be rerolling ones to hit in an Aspect Host. So you'd probably get to reroll 2 dice, which may convert into 1 extra kill, which is going to give them that 5 Marine kill on the squad. But, that could be mitigated in other ways in Warhost, right? Like, a stray Shuriken Cannon can kill a Marine. So yeah, it does matter in some situations, but in other situations, it's like, I'm basically killing this unit anyway. Like, for example, with the Zerman and Dire Avengers, like, yeah, I'm going to kill this unit anyway. I'd rather have the extra mobility, or, I'd rather have the ability to kind of build out my army in different ways with different types of units that are going to be really good with Webway Portal and, Fire and Fade. I could just take a unit of Dark Reapers, Fire and Fade them back into a Wave Serpent every turn. Like, there's a really good argument to be had about which is the better detachment, and I do think it just comes down to, what your meta is at the end of the day. I think if your meta has a lot of stuff that, ignores damage or half damage or -1 damage, and it's like a ton of stuff that you need to deal with, you need to kill, then yeah, Aspect Host is going to be the greater pick into that specific army. But in every other case, I think Warhost is just better, in my personal opinion.
And if I just had like real ones to hit, that would have been so nice.
Yep. I will tell you that the Blood Angel Detachment Angelic Inheritors just giving reroll 1s to a bunch of your units is huge, because it means their reliability goes through the roof. And it's kind of the same with Aspect. Warhost, on the other hand, is good because it is super fast.
It's super fast, but like
you get 6 tokens. Do you need 6 tokens?
I don't know if you need 5.
Yeah.
Like, there were many turns I just like ended with like 4, or I was like, I'm just gonna spend 1 here in case I roll a 1 on this advance. Like,
yeah, I mean, +3 to your movement. I mean, that could be literally on anything and everything, right? So anything that has battle focus gets +3 to its movement value. That's really good.
Yeah. Honestly, the +1 inch to the move is a lot bigger.
More important, yeah.
But I don't think you need all of that. Like, the part of the detachment that I'm most sad giving up is the second get back in a transport and the fallback shoot and charge.
So here's the thing. I have played a lot of games with Warhost. The number of turns that I use both Fire and Fades to get back in a transport is actually really small.
Is that because of the CP cost? Is that because
like,
2 CP?
It's like partially because the CP cost. It's partially because that's like all you're doing.
And I would say, remember that Fire and Fade allows you to as well not only move back into transports, but also just move in general, So moving back behind walls, moving behind footprints is possible with that stratagem. Whereas Skyborn Sanctuary, it's only possible to move back into a transport. And that transport, again, like they said earlier in the video, which is true, is a little bit hard to hide. So even with fade back, even if it gets shot once and then it fades back, it might still be picked off.
Doing that turn, it's partially just because like a lot of times you just don't have a good target
Yeah, that's fair.
because your opponent just like won't expose.
And now, as the Chekhov's gun foreshadowing payoff, wave serpents are this goddamn big, guys.
They're
Like, they are so
so
huge.
big.
And the problem is, this and Aspect Host are predicated on getting back in transports afterwards. And you know what? If your transport is this big, because it has little fins sticking out, those are part of the hull, and you can't not have them.
If this book could take a Torox, if the Bone Singers came together and were like, hey guys, let's just borrow the Rhino. Like, we'll just take it, we're just going to go into the Imperial Armories, we're going to take it, we're going to bring it back to the craft world, and we're just going to use it. Aspect in Warhost would be so good, because you can hide a Rhino.
Absolute filth, absolute Monkai filth, suggesting that we would taint our beautiful army with ugly metal boxes. Ugh, disgusting.
Rhino. You cannot hide a Wave Serpent. They're just too big.
Yeah, it just will get shot if you want to be in a useful place.
Yeah.
It just will. And it's durable, but it's not take a round of shooting and not die durable.
Yeah.
And that really does legitimately limit the power of Aspect and Warhost.
That is why, guys, Fire and Fade is really good, because once your Wave Serpent gets destroyed, you can still move back in and out of terrain, behind a footprint and, over a wall.
Significantly. Getting back in transports twice, as you mentioned, not that crazy valuable. The fallback shoot and charge is pretty huge.
Yes. That is like one of the best strength detachment. It's like the only one outside of Harlequins.
Yeah, Harlequins have it, and this is the other one that has it, especially when some of your best students want to be on top of your opponent. Like, Fire Dragons shoot, and they just will not shoot again, right? They're either going to be dead or get tagged or whatever.
Their Fire Dragons are a one-use missile or the game's over.
Yeah. If you get to use them again,
It doesn't matter.
It's pretty ridiculous. And that's fine. Warhost is legitimately pretty good, though.
It's a good, I went 2-0 the Arctic Thief, right? To drop,
Yes.
right? Like, it's a good detachment.
Yes. And it's good because it has a lot of mobility, and it's essentially the same suite of strats as Aspect Host, right?
Yeah, it's like you lose some damage, but you gain some utility.
And that's good. Not really what Eldar needs, which means that we think Aspect Host is the number 2 detachment in the book.
Yes, I agree here. It gives you enough of the Warhost. It gives you get back in a boat.
Yes.
You really only need the.
So I'm going to be doing a video on Aspect Host in probably a couple days from now. I have a game tomorrow with the Aspect Host, hoping to get that in quick so that I can kind of solidify what I think about the detachment, But, here's the thing. I think it's really exciting on paper. I think that in my previous game with it, I found that I wasn't really using some of the stratagems, and that maybe just because of the matchup. I wasn't going against an opponent that had a lot of damage mitigation. Or if they did, it was like my Fire Dragons would have just killed it anyway, like it was overkill, right? But it is good. There's no doubt about that. I don't know if the extra damage is really that much better than the utility of having something like Falls Back, Shoot and Charge, or Webway Gate, where you could just come in and add a reserve, like an uppy downy ability. That's really good for a lot of different things. And it's just, I wasn't that convinced that just front loading everything on damage is the way to go.
One, it gives you the real ones is like, a lot of times you can do the math and be like, yeah, it shouldn't matter.
And then you just roll bad.
Roll a little bad, right?
If you have no rerolls, it's like, oops.
The big thing for me is like, if you're shooting like Ozerman, right? And you're like, I hit on 2s, and then you're just like, I rolled 3 1s, and you're like, Ozerman go turn suddenly just like flops.
It's bad.
Yeah, but you have the aspect tokens to mitigate that. You could command reroll, there's a lot of ways, like, if you do, you're always going to have that, like, once per game ultra flop, right? But the Eldar aspect warriors have ways to get around that. So I don't know if I'm convinced by that argument.
You just like don't do that in aspect host.
Yeah, you just reroll your ones to hit, or reroll ones to wound, and you get to choose. Like warp spiders are good; they're
Yes.
a good data sheet. In aspect hosts,
They're
they
great.
are messed up.
Yeah.
I will say this: warp spiders are in almost every tournament list that I've seen that's done well with the Eldari so far with the Codex. They're just a solid unit, right? I mean, usually people are taking Lycus, but sometimes not. Sometimes people are just taking plain warp spiders, and I think they are really good. I don't know if rerolls ones to wound is really that great. It's not the reason why you take them. You just take them, and they're just slightly better in this detachment. I don't think they're that great in this detachment. As per, kind of comparing it to other detachments, I think they're just good in general, personally.
Strength 4, AP 1, damage 1, flamers
Real wounds.
with reroll ones to wound and ignores cover is messed up.
The Mantle of Wisdom Reaper unit is also like so good.
Yeah, reroll ones to hit and wound.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can give them lethal, sustained, flip. Like,
Yeah.
lethal, sustained are pretty ridiculous as well. That you can do both.
You can.
You can do both.
I'm going to say something a little controversial, and that's that I think the Autarch with Mantle of Wisdom is just a little bit too expensive for the Dark Reaper package. Because I think they do what they're going to do anyway, right? Like, you're already either rerolling hits or wounds at strength 10. So if you're going against something super high toughness, it's not that big of a deal. You could throw lethal hits on them. It's not that big of a deal. They don't hit on 2s naturally. Even with the Autarch, they don't hit on 2s or anything like that. So when you're firing them downrange, you got 10 shots. You're maybe rerolling 1 or 2 dice. And those have a very low chance of actually proccing into a lethal hit or sustained hit. So, yeah, I just don't think you need the Autarch with them. I mean, that's just me, right? But, you do get the free stratagem, but you can't use it if you've already used it on another unit. So that's the other downside of that. I think I would much rather just, instead of putting the Mantle of Wisdom, I think I'd much rather have the Autarch with like a small unit of Striking Scorpions or something like that with a +1 damage enhancement, and just have them like be kind of like an assassin type unit with precision. Just go in there, kill a character, an important character to somebody's army, and then just say, yeah, now you have to deal with 5 Striking Scorpions and my Autarch in your deployment zone. And it's going to stifle your game plan enough to where the rest of my army can get into position, and then I can just swamp you, right? I mean, that's what I would do in Aspect Host. I wouldn't really put it with the Dark Reapers.
It's just, you already have the utility. You already have the mobility. You don't need that. You have a lot more damage, which helps.
You have a lot more consistent damage.
A lot more consistent damage, which helps in a tournament a lot because you won't just go into somebody and completely flop.
Yeah, I had like one of my go turns just like went poorly.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, you were playing Warhost.
Playing Warhost, right? And it was the Eviscer thing, right? I was like, okay, the plan is I'm going to charge this Eviscer with Jane'Zar and her Banshees and like some like Inquisitor Acolyte or something like that. And then I'm going to be here, and then when my opponent drops in, there's going to be a screen here, and he can't hit like my important units. And then I just rolled a bunch of 1s, and the Eviscer survived, and then killed all the Banshees and Jane'Zar. And then you just like...
I don't understand how that happens. I mean, oh god, that must have been an awful roll. But yeah, sometimes there's not much you can do about that. I think that's a bad example of why you should choose Aspect Host over Warhost. But yeah, I guess in that specific instance where you roll all 1s with all your units, all your Howling Banshees, then you'd need rerolls 1s, right?
Deep strike in that spot, and I was like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah. It turns out that your units, if you fail...
I just also want to mention he did apparently win that game. So I don't know how important that really was, right?
To kill a target, that target will kill you.
Yes.
And so having reliability is super important. And that just is kind of the hallmark of Aspect Host. It has reliable damage, and so you can back people off with it. You can really scare them, and you still have the ability to get back in transports when necessary. You can still do that play style of, I'm going to kick out 10 fire dragons and then melt you and then get back in my transport. And what are you going to do? Oh, you shot my wave serpent because it's gigantic. But that's a whole nother whole nother thing.
Mm-hmm.
The main issue that both of these detachments have, that all of Eldar has actually, other than like Spirit Conclave, does not hold primary well.
Not at all.
Does not hold it well. It's honestly fairly underwhelmed with the rest of the book compared to the absurd levels of hype when the book came out, because it just does not hold primary.
Almost every single game I play into someone who's not played into Eldar before. Turn 1, turn 2, they're like, this is the most broken codex the game has ever seen. And then they like look at the scoreboard and they're like, oh, I'm up by 10 because I had like a lictor survive on the center point. Cool, back to you, I guess.
I mean, truthfully, if a lictor is surviving on the center point, a single lictor, then something went really wrong for you. As an Aeldari player, like, you should be wiping every objective almost every turn until the end of the game with the Aeldari. Especially in Aspect Host. I mean, that's how you should build your list, by the way. If you guys are wondering how do I build a correct Aeldari Aspect Host list? Really what you have to do is you have to make sure you have enough damage to wipe every objective clean turn after turn, and then just put something cheap on it, right? Like, I think Aspect Host really does well with a lot of, cheap, quote unquote cheap combat units like Striking Scorpions and Howling Banshees for that exact reason.
Yeah. And then what, you need to start shoving them with your like fire dragons at 12-inch range coming out of wave serpents that aren't actually that durable.
Yeah, it leads Eldar to play a very aggressive playstyle, which will work most of the time, but sometimes it will not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if anyone was ever saying that this was the most broken codex the game has ever seen. They probably were, because people are hyperbolic. The game has seen.
You know what? And he's right, but it's also for another reason. It's not because the game is hyperbolic. It's because people hate Eldar. Like, we could have gotten literally the crappiest codex in the entire game, and people would have still come out and said we're OP. I guarantee you, and I see comments on my channel all the time when I review a codex or I review a unit or something like that. I'll always get like a dirty, nasty little, comment about, oh, Eldar are so OP, of course they're OP, And it's like, yeah, I get it. Somebody came into the shop once, challenged you to a game, you thought you were going to win with your Smurfs, and you got tabled. I don't know what to tell you. Obviously that other player knew a lot more about the game than you, and that's why you lost. Or it could have just been about dice. Right? You don't have to take it that seriously.
Some ridiculous codexes.
Yeah.
This is not even the most broken Eldar army in 10th edition.
Yeah.
I actually agree, right? Remember the beginning of the edition? Oh my god. If you were running anything but double Wraith Knight, you were seen as a god. You were seen as a merciful god who would give you, sweet, sweet nectar. Because everyone was running it. Everybody in tournaments was running the double Wraith Knight or single Wraith Knight, a bunch of Wraith Guard, and it was just so broken, so unbelievably stupid. And yeah, I couldn't even play it. By the way, in the beginning of the edition, I know I made videos about it, but I wasn't playing it against my local game group. I wasn't playing the Wraith Knight. I wasn't using a bunch of Wraith Guard. I used a bunch of Wraith Guard and Wraith Knight one time to see what it was like, and that's it. And then I just ran Aspect Warriors because I love Aspects, and I ran Jet Bikes because I love Jet Bikes, and that was it. I had fun, because otherwise every game would be over in like 3 turns.
By a significant amount. I played into broken Eldar armies in 10th edition. I stopped taking games into Quentin because I just was like, dude, if you want to table me, you just set my...
Quentin was running the double Wraith Knight. I mean, honestly, competitive players weren't running anything but that, so there's no reason why they wouldn't if they wanted to win, but God, it was cheesy, and God, it wasn't fun.
My models up, you shoot them, you go home, like, it's fine. This is not that. I think that the reaction to all of these detachments, barring one, is an overreaction. And it's one that I shared. I thought that these detachments were gross.
I did too. Like, I when I was like reading the book for the first time, I was like, oh my God, this book is incredible. It's so broken.
And you play it, and I I lost my first like 3 games playing with the army.
Yeah, me too.
I know you lost your first 3 games playing with the army. You just can't hold primary, man.
Like at all.
Like you have to run at people with the army just to give yourself space to hold.
And this is why I would say that, you know, these guys, they play a lot of different armies. They're not like typically like Eldar mains. They don't only play Eldar, right? They play Eldar and they play other factions. As an Eldar player who's been playing basically Eldar alone for 20 plus years, they will never be able to hold primary unless you're talking about rates. They're never going to play that game. So you have to adapt to it. You have to play in different ways. And they're just not going to play like the typical 40k army. That's just what it is. So yeah, if you're used to playing a certain way and then you build an Eldar list and you try to win in a typical fashion with the Eldar, you're just not going to have a good time. You're not going to win because they cannot hold primary. So you got to, with that in mind, you have to play a very different game.
Hold primary.
There's also like so many broken units in this book that are actually bad. like Fugan and 10 Fire Dragons and a Wave Serpent is like absurd in what it does on every level. It moves infinity far, it pops out, it shoots 3 Rogel Dorns, and I think it's a bad unit.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is what I've been saying, because it's too many points, it's too much to invest, and it's better to just go with the 5 Fire Dragons or 5 Fire Dragons and Fuegan. That is enough to pop a Rogel Dorn. Plus, everybody nowadays is running the tank commanders anyway, and the Rogel Dorn tank commanders are not as hard to kill as the Rogel Dorn battle tank, right? So you just have to run 5. That's all you need. 5 and Fuegan. You can have the other 5 do something else, right, in a turn. You don't need to lock them up and overkill something.
It just isn't what you need.
Not at all. Yeah, just do it. Yeah.
It's like 400 points in a transport.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just not what Eldar need. Because when that transport gets popped, the whole unit dies.
Yeah.
And you're spending a CP every turn, and it has to get within range every turn without getting the Wave Serpent killed. And it's just not what you need.
No, not at all.
But you know what you do need?
This is an army that I originally was like, I don't think it's that good.
Same.
I
I also didn't think it was that good. We are both super hard on the Ynnari hype train.
Yes.
Yes. The Devoted of a Need?
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Before they start talking, I want to just say one thing. The original reason why I didn't have these guys in number 1 was simply because I didn't think that anything could get in a Wave Serpent or Falcon when I first read those rules, the Ynnari rules. But now I think, obviously they're referring to Ynnari units as Ynnari Incubi, Ynnari Witches, Ynnari Cabalites that can't go into the Wave Serpents and Falcons. It's not like every unit in your army. So you definitely still can have, 10 Dire Avengers in a Wave Serpent if you wanted to. You could still have Fire Dragons in a Wave Serpent. You could still have Howling Banshees in a Falcon. You can have that stuff still. Although, the more I dive into the Ynnari, the more I realize, yeah, they're pretty broken, and in a way that I think they're going to get nerfs very quickly. So we're going to listen to what they have to say, and then I'm going to kind of follow up with some of the things that I think about them and some of the ways to maybe fix them so that they're not as oppressive. Because, by the way, a good player playing these guys is just not going to lose into, your most matchups.
This army is
except, I'll say this, except a very, very skewed melee-oriented build.
Gross and stupid, and it does all the things that compensate for what Eldar has problems with.
I think every other Eldar detachment fits very neatly somewhere in the A to B minus range.
Yep, depending on the
I
detachment.
think Warhost and Aspect Host probably in the mid A's, and then down to Guardians and B minus. I think Ynnari is S plus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ynnari is the only way I'm currently looking at playing Eldar.
I think
after experimenting with a bunch of the other ones, Ynnari is the way I'm
I
going.
took Warhost to the RTT, and I was like, I'm gonna try it. I played a bunch of games with Eldar. I know what these units do. I'm a much better Eldar player now. I'm gonna give it an honest, tournament ready shot. What does Warhost do? And it felt so much worse than Ynnari.
Yeah, it felt
so
fine.
much worse. It felt like it was a good army. It just was not Ynnari.
Yeah. We both took Ynnari to an RTT
And we're like,
a week ago, and
yeah,
we're like,
ooh,
oh,
okay.
no.
Yeah.
I've been playing several practice games, and by several, I mean a lot of practice games with Ynnari. Same with you.
Yes.
Ynnari is stupid.
They are hard to play. They are incredibly unforgiving. But when they are working, they are like so good.
So here's what Ynnari does. It has 3 detachment rules. One is that you do not get Phoenix Lords or any Epicures of any kind other than Ynnari.
Which originally was what I was like, why would you?
Why would you do that? The
Yeah.
Phoenix Lords are the best part. And it's like, okay, the only one I would actually take is Jane'Zar.
Yeah.
Now, because you need to keep points costs down on the units.
I might take Lycus, but I don't think I will.
Like the reason, like Vix List, for example, has infinite 5-man units. And I think that's the way to go if you're playing Aspect Host or War Host.
I think you take like the 1 10-man Reaper unit and the rest are 5s.
Yep.
Yep.
I don't think you need any Phoenix Lords other than possibly Jane'Zar. Probably Jane'Zar.
Yeah.
But the other ones are just inefficient.
Mhm.
This says you can't take any of that.
Yeah, so you just don't.
That's not like a huge deal. Honestly, I thought it would be. It isn't.
It's not.
Okay. What do you get? Let me sing you a song of Lethal Intent. Lethal Intent is one of the 3 detachment rules. And it is the best rule in the book, by far. It might be the best single rule in the entire game at the moment.
I think it is the best single. I think it is. I would take Lethal Intent over Oath at the moment.
Yeah.
I think it is the best. Yeah, you're right. I think it's the single best rule in the game.
Okay, so here's how it works. At the end of your opponent's shooting phase, if any of your units have died, there is no way around this, right? Like, if they throw a grenade, did that count as me killing you? Yes. If I blow something up and you die, does that count as me killing you?
Yes.
Yes. There is no way around it other than just not killing units. If any of my units have died in your shooting phase, at the end of the shooting phase, i.e., you have finished shooting, you're all done, no more shots are to be had, I get to take one of my units and make a move with it. Just make a normal move.
It's not D6 plus 1. It's not max of 7. It's just move.
You just move. You just move. And funny story, it's a normal move, so you can use a token to make it either star engines or +2.
Yeah.
Cool. That's pretty neat.
That's the one thing that I think makes this detachment broken is the fact that you can just move across the battlefield after your opponent shoots you, and they can't do anything about it. They can't overwatch you because it's now the shooting phase, so the overwatch doesn't work. There's no reaction that your opponent can realistically do to counter that movement. And that's why I think it's OP, right? That's what I think is going to change, by the way, is that instead of just making a normal move as much as you want, it's just going to be capped at like 7 inches. I think that would be very, very much the fair thing to do to make this detachment more balanced, is just make it 7 inches. I think it's still really powerful. It's still really good, but it's not super broken to the point where I can have a unit literally turn 1. In my turn, I move up 14 plus D6 plus 1 star engines, and then in your turn, I move up another, 16 inches with my vehicle, right? And then I disembark, I make them immune to Overwatch, and then I charge something, and then I kill something, and then I hop back in my Venom. And now your opponent has to deal with something in the middle of their backfield that's terrorizing their, you know what I mean? And probably has fights first by now, because it's probably been injured along the way a little bit in combat or something, and it's just impossible to deal with under normal circumstances. And this army can very easily get like almost like a turn 1 victory, almost like if your opponent makes the wrong moves, this list can beat them in 1 turn.
So the levels of busted that rule enables is ridiculous.
I have sacrificed an Incarn to trigger that rule once and been excited with how much better using the rule once was than having a Incarn in my army.
Yeah. So the way it works, let's say you put 5 Rangers on the center objective.
Yep.
Your opponent has to kill them because you'll just score 1 million points on primary otherwise, right? And if they're just literally taking a shooting army, sitting it down, staring at 5 Rangers and going, I will not shoot you, what are we doing here? What we're doing is winning, by the way.
Yes,
That's what we're doing.
So the counter to this, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys have shooting armies, you're like, man, I can't beat Ynnari, this is some bullshit. The way you beat them is if you're playing Tau, you don't shoot them, you just ram them in combat, right? You just charge the Rangers. That's all you do. You get right up to their face, you force their D6 movement, and then you just charge in with your Devilfish. And I know that sounds crazy, but you tank shock them, you do some mortal wounds to them, and then you just either finish them off in combat. You probably won't because you're hitting on 4s or 5s in combat, but you're not giving up. You're taking the primary away from them, so they're not scoring primary points, and you are forcing them off the objective, and you're also preventing your opponent from being able to use that lethal intent movement. Because, by the way, any kills that happen in the charge phase do not proc lethal intent.
They shoot you. Now, it's not immediate. It's not my unit then moves on to the center objective and you get to shred them with bullets. No, I wait. And I just go, cool, are you all done? And they go, yes. And then I just go drive another unit onto the center.
No,
Sorry. I was getting to that. Yeah. So there are a lot of other things you can do. One, they blast you off the center. You sticky the objective on death like you're a goddamn world eater. Yes. And then you move, at the end of the shooting phase, you move a unit onto a different objective and you get your 15. And there's like not a lot of ways to prevent this effectively.
So this book, top to bottom, struggles holding primary. Ynnari is one of, if not the best primary holding army in the game.
I have had my opponent have 3 repulsors within 6 inches of each of the midfield objectives. I got a 15, and there was no way for him to stop me.
I played into Tyler Bortel's Admech. He's an incredible player. He's on Team USA. This was a very practiced list. He was running an anti-Eldar list with like max Qatari Rangers.
Oh, yeah, you're not scoring primary, dog.
I outscored him on primary by 20 points.
Yeah, like what is he gonna do? He shoots you off, and you're just like, when you're all finished, I will now change the board. Ooh.
Yeah.
That's one of 3 detachment rules, by the way. Just keep that in mind.
The Ynnari detachment's possibly one of the most troll detachments, one of the most trollolol detachments in the entire Aeldari book. It's so funny. It's even more troll than Seer Council, and I am loving Seer Council right now because it is so troll. But there are definitely ways around it and ways to counter it. And there's just not a lot of ways to counter the Ynnari, which is why I think it's just kind of broken, and they do need to nerf it.
There are no range restrictions on this. It's not a unit within 12 of the unit that died. No, a unit anywhere goes any direction it wants. Would you like, for example, a unit I like is an Archon plus Incubi in a Venom.
Yep.
With an enhancement that makes the Archon hit reasonably hard. This is in a Venom. You kill a unit of Rangers on an objective. I sticky the objective. At the end of the phase, that Venom goes 14 plus Star Engine, so D6 plus 1, clean into the open. Just straight towards my opponent. And they can't shoot anymore. It's the end of the shooting phase. No more shooting to be had. Then in my turn, they get out 3. The Archon moves 8, and I plus 2 that. So they go 13 more inches out of the boat and charge their home objective. Just from like downtown, dog. Like if it's 36 inches away from their home objective, I'm charging on like a 4.
That's like, it took us a while to like figure it out. Also stuff like, if you like plan to shoot one unit and charge another one, you like shoot one and you death, and the one you're going to charge just like is now 10 inches backwards.
Dude, you shoot the Venom. You go to charge the guys inside. The guys inside go token. I move 9 inches directly away from you. You can't charge me. I played a game into a World Eaters player who brought 2 Brigands. Those Brigands arrived from reserves 9 inches away from me and then did actions. Because if he shot me, his turn would have turned inside out.
Yeah.
That is compounded, by the way, by the fact that all of your units have a 3-up armor save, or some of them have 4-up, but still, 3-up armor save and a 5-up invuln, and access to -1 to wound. And so what this means is you can really game it. If your opponent hands you 7 AP0 saves, you can just take your invulns to die. And then, oh god, I've triggered lethal intent. Uh-oh.
About once a game, I CP real successful saves in order to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, you still have access to like fade back and all the other agile tokens. So like,
Yeah, so
just
like-
keep that in mind.
Like when they shoot at you, they don't know if you're going to go -1 to wound, take your armor, lose a guy or not, and then move away from them, right? With the token. Or if you're going to take your invulns, not -1 to wound, kill yourself, and then trigger the reactive move somewhere else at the end of the phase.
And also move an incarn there.
And also, also drop the incarn.
There's a game, I think it was on YouTube, you guys can go watch it if you want to see this in action, where I'm playing Ynnari and Nick was playing Tzeentch Demons. And there were 2 Striking Scorpions in his backfield, like standing in the open, like arms in the air, like top of his turn. His whole 2,000 points of Tzeentch Demons staring at them. And Nick was like, I can't kill them.
If I kill them, things become worse.
So I just had to have the Striking Scorpions, they just like stood there like alive.
Excellent point, Sanoct. Excellent point. You can go to ground to get a 6-up and take that instead.
I'm gonna do that now.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. That is a cool plan.
That's actually pretty crazy. And the fact that in some missions, your battle line units can actually go to ground for free. So you could have things like, Coblite Warriors going to ground for free and then, basically auto failing all their saves. That's nuts. That's absolutely nuts.
So your opponent always has to worry, if I put enough shots into this that it might actually kill a couple models, I might accidentally kill the unit. And if I kill the unit, suddenly everything goes wrong. And I mean, it goes wrong. If their charge that they're setting up to get on the objective, suddenly you token, your unit moves like 14 inches backwards.
Or worse, you like take your big Banshee squad and like move next to it. Be like, do you want to charge your JPI into me now? Oh, I'm going to proc you with my Banshees that were on the other side of the table.
Yeah, I have 5 Rangers on the center. You're like, I'm not going to kill that. I'm going to charge it with Jump Pack Intercessors in that example. Yeah. And there's nothing in the area. Everything's fine. I'm going to just fire some bolters over here. Oops, I killed a unit. Whoopsie. Then, as you said, the Howling Banshees that fight first with the Autarch right up behind the unit in the.
And again, if you're playing Marines, and you want to shoot your bolters, don't. All you have to do, because Marines are very well rounded, they're generalist infantry, just charge, because you will have enough attacks especially with Oath of Moment, you will have enough attacks to kill the unit. Right? You're going to have 15 attacks unless they have fights first. But if they don't have fights first, which is going to be hard because it's probably going to be a lot of Banshees, but there are some units in the Ynnari that aren't going to have it. You charge in and you just make your melee attacks, right? You just basically do that. Or you charge a Rhino into something, right? If you charge a Rhino into something and tank shock, I think that's your greatest tool against the Ynnari because you're doing a bunch of mortal wound damage to their unit and you're tying them up in combat with something they can't kill. Like Howling Banshees really can't kill armor. Incubi, they're a little better against it, but they're not that much better. They're I don't even know. Yeah, they're a little bit better, but not by a lot. So they can't kill armor, right? So you just kind of do that. You definitely have to rely on, your vehicles to charge in, tank shock, do some mortal wounds, tie them up, make them weaker, and then finish units off in combat when you can, or just bum rush them with a bunch of stuff, get angles on them. Like if you have a fast shooting army, get angles on a lot of different units at once and kill those units all together. And then you'll be able to do a little bit more work into their army later because, they can move something afterward, but they have just lost a significant part of their army, right? So they have a lot less tools to play with. I think that's probably the best ways of dealing with the Ynnari, but there's honestly not a lot you can do.
Center, and now they can heroic if you charge. Your turn turns inside out. It's horrible. That is one of 3 detachment rules. One of 3.
Anyway,
it's the best one. The other one is at the start of the fight phase, you pick one of your units that is below starting strength, and it gains fight first.
Yeah. Quite good.
That's really good.
On Wraith Lords.
It's really good on monsters. Did you know that the Incarn does not heal D3 wounds whenever she kills anything? She heals up to D3 wounds. I'm proud I found that. So that means you can heal up to as many as you want, up to as many as you roll. So you just heal up to 11 and have perma fights first on the Incarn. If I had a scenario where the Incarn was in combat. The Incarn, by the way, takes the level of trickery that army can do and
So, like,
takes it to the
absurd
point where
level.
you can't play around it. I don't care how good you are going to fall into traps.
Yeah.
It just is going to happen. I don't care if you are God's gift to 40k. Like, you just are going to have problems with
There's
this
just
now.
like not an answer.
Yeah, there's just
Like
too
there's
many stuff.
like it doesn't matter how much like you could have the best supercomputer for 40k. Just like there is no answer.
You're going to have to go through the tricks. You're not going to get around them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not like you can't win, right? It's not like you can't win the game. I have lost games with Ynnari. It's
Me too.
possible.
Yeah.
It's just you have to go through the tricks. You can't avoid them. You have to go through them. And that's rough.
The best way to beat Ynnari is actually just to like punch it in the face. Be like, cool, you're gonna move if I kill something, so I'm gonna kill 9 units.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. I'm going to do it all at once or not at all.
The army is made of like actual paper.
It's made of 3-up armor saves, like little units. But yeah, I had a scenario where the Incarn was in combat with a beast boss and a knob. And my opponent threw 2 squig mines at it and then went to fall back so he could throw a grenade with something else. And I overwatched, killed both, healed back up to 6 or whatever. And then he had to like completely turn his turn inside out to get around the fact I could fight first, precision his character, heal again. Like, now I won't die to the grenade. It was... The level of trickery is kind of ridiculous. So the fight first is really, really good. And then the third detachment is not even that. It's not like that great. It's a little splash of nonsense on top, which is that when you move when you're shot at with the token, you can once per turn elect to be able to move into combat with your opponent with that. That sounds broken. It is specifically only the unit that shot you, which means that you increase the cognitive load on your opponent just to 11.
Jack, do you think Ynnari is the best army in the game?
I'm just going to say this. I think it's one of the best armies in the entire game right now. And it's just simply because there's a lot of factions out there who are going to be really hurting against it. It has a lot of just really good matchups that are almost instant wins. And the matchups that are hard are still winnable, right? They're still very winnable. Like against an all melee list, there is still stuff you can do because of the vast amount of fights first that you have. You know, the amount of just absolutely pure mayhem you can cause on your opponent is still really insane. So even if somebody is just running everything that's melee and is not going to shoot you at all to proc your lethal intent, you're still in a good spot.
Yes.
I think so too.
I think so.
I think
it's the best army in the game. It is ridiculous. No tactical grenade brigade does not stump them. Unfortunately, so what we found is that Ynnari does not love
mono combat.
It can definitely play that game. It feels way more fair when it's playing into mono combat.
Like World Eaters is really bad. Chaos Knights can be really bad.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's like a fair game, I'd say. Chaos Knights is like atrocious.
Yeah, I think a melee knight list is probably one of the best ways to beat Ynnari. You know, because it's 2 things that the army doesn't really do well against is, you know, really tough, you know, a ton of different war dogs, you know, that your Howling Banshees and Incubi aren't really going to trade well into. And then on top of that, you know, it's melee oriented, so they're not going to be shooting you that much, right? Or they're not going to be shooting enough to kill your units. They're probably going to be like, you know, with those Havoc launchers, they're probably going to like kill a model here and there, but that's about it.
If you want to beat Ynnari, play Chaos Knights.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to like begin that matchup.
That matchup is awful.
It's pretty good.
Mono combat is like where the army feels fair, right? Into all shooting, the army does not feel fair.
No.
It feels really rough to deal with. Into shooting and combat mixed together,
it's like, then it starts to become like unbeatable.
Yeah, because when you need your shooting to set up your combat, your shooting actually makes your combat worse. Because you shoot with like your tank bustas and you kill something, that means your fight phase will turn inside out.
The best way to beat Ynnari is to just like not shoot your guns. And if you have to shoot your guns, it gets real bad.
Yeah.
Like if you're like, I don't know, Chaos Space Marines, and you're like, I have a unit of Havocs, just like don't shoot it.
Yep.
Just like don't shoot it.
If you have one shooting unit, that one shooting unit, I hope you didn't spend that many points on it. Because you should probably not use it. I do think, for what it's worth, the army is going to be hard enough to play. I don't expect its win rate is going to be like insanely high.
Legit. It took like probably 10 combined games between us before we started to get it in like a reasonable shape.
Yeah.
We went through a lot of drafts, a lot of different units, and a lot of different strategies, and it's a hard army to play.
It's a hard army to play. It's a decently hard army to build. If you want to see our latest builds, you got to check out the war room there, buddy boy. You want to go down to the link in the description. You're going to get to the war.
So, yeah, I think its win rate is going to be high, though, amongst players that are good. And I think that it's probably going to have one of the highest win rates in competitive play. That's just my guess, but it's not going to take people that long to figure it out. Like, honestly, these guys play a lot of 40k, but other people that are going to be entering tournaments pretty soon with the Aeldari also play a lot of 40k. So, yeah, I think the tournament data is going to be, I think at your local game shop, Ynnari won't have a, it's not going to win every single game it plays. It's not that OP, right? For, a person who's not experienced with it. But it's going to be really strong at the tournament level. And the more people play the detachment, the better they get at, and the more insane it's going to feel for other players playing against it. So yeah, I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to dominate. And, we'll see about in about a month. We'll give it a month and see where they are. And I guarantee you, Ynnari is going to have a very good win rate. They are. I just see it coming. Because I don't think the average casual Aeldari player that is throwing his lot in with the, local GT is going to be playing a Ynnari detachment. I just don't think they're going to be playing Ynnari in the first place. They'll probably be playing something like Aspect Host or War Host or something like that, right? I don't think they're going to be playing the Ynnari. I think only the top competitive players are going to be wanting to play Ynnari almost exclusively, like, Quentin and Jack said here, because it's OP. And of course, competitive players, they love stuff that's OP. Because anything to give you a little bit of an edge in a tournament, right, is what you're going to go for. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to have a high win rate. I kind of disagree that it's not going to have that. And then, of course, GW is going to notice this right away, and they will get nerfed in some ways. Whether it's by points, you might see Ynnari units going up in points, like Incubi or something like that, or you might just see the detachment rule get nerfed preemptively. So anyway, yeah, so let's I think they're done with the video here, but let's just check real quick.
Warroom.vhx.tv, where there's a free 3-day trial. You can hop in there. You can see all.
Yeah, they're just talking about their stuff. So yeah, I usually don't indulge in Art of War content because I think, it's a lot of meta chasing a lot of times, which is fair. It's a competitive Warhammer 40k channel, so there is going to be that. But I try not to watch it too much because I think that even subconsciously, watching too much highly competitive, channels, Warhammer channels, can almost kind of warp your mind into just thinking there's stuff that's just bad and stuff that's just good. And I like to have an open mind with a lot of the stuff. So I don't participate in a lot of it, but these guys have put on several Aeldari battle reports that are quite good. And as long as you go into it with, kind of their opinions with a grain of salt, right? They are competitive players. They are good, but I don't think they know everything. And certainly some of my first impressions upon stuff has been wrong before. And these guys, same thing with them. We're all just human. And, you don't take everything at just face value and it's as a fact, like, oh, it's just factually correct that, this is this way and this is going to be the most powerful, or this is more powerful than this, right? But, anyway, I guess I'm getting off track here a little bit. But yeah, good content for the most part, but I try not to watch too much of, competitive Warhammer 40k because I don't want to, kind of get into that mindset. Even subconsciously, I want to keep an open mind about pretty much everything so I can, give unbiased and good advice when I do my videos. Speaking of, the next video we're going to come out with is going to be on the Aspect Host itself. I'm excited to finally play some Aspect Hosts. I think I've nailed down a list that I really like, and I'm going to be bringing it in a game tomorrow. We have a lot of Warp Spiders. We have a lot of Swooping Hawks. I know that's weird, but I think that's probably one of the better ways to play this army, believe it or not, is with, really fast elements that are going to be able to hit your opponent really hard right away. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So anyway, the list will, maybe I'll do a after action kind of video where I'm just talking about what happened and talking about the list and stuff like that. And then we'll do a more formal video after that. I'm just not sure yet. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about that, and I'll definitely do that. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the Art of War guys for coming out with the Aeldari content. It is appreciated. And if you guys want to support me and join the channel's Patreon, I will leave the link in the description. It's totally free, by the way, for the most part. If you want to support, monetarily, you can, and that would be really appreciated, but you don't have to. You can sign up for a free trial, and that will give you access to our channel Discord, which is a Discord in which Eldar players and enthusiasts talk about strategies, tactics, and of course hobbying with me and with other awesome members of the community. We can talk about some, Eldari victories with some of the people who have been going to GTs lately, who are also part of the Discord as well. Also, have a channel store page and have an Amazon affiliate link. So if you want to grab some discounted Eldar minis on Amazon or some discounted Eldar inspired apparel on the channel store page, let me know and leave the link in the description, and you can grab some cool Eldar apparel for your local game store. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.